Hello, welcome to the Crackpot Podcast.
Beautiful day to start up a revolution. Molotov cocktails, martini shotgun shells. Wild, 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 wild one. God forbid the cops get called. I say the more the merrier inside this free. Gotta see it fall. I got front row tickets to the greatest show of all.
Welcome to the Crackpot Podcast. We have a special returning guest today. It's Baruch. Thank you for joining us. And of course, the Crackpot is here. James.
Hi.
So
hey.
We are probably going to cover any number of subjects today. I have no idea. I read some of what you sent, Baruch, but I did not read all of it. I will confess right now. But I hope that you're ready to just take the reins here and tell us all the things that you want us to hear.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I gotta tell you, James. I've been reading your post-mortem training logs, and I think the last time we did this, we did it without video, but you're looking like it's working. So I'm really happy to, I'm really happy to read that, because I remember that like a few months ago, until you started going down this road, you were sounding very like stoically morose about your impending future decline and so on and so forth. And you're looking real healthy, man. So I'm real glad. Just for selfish reasons.
I want to keep going. I want to get down. It'll look really hideous if I get down to my teenage weight, which is what I want to do. I'm shooting for Mickey Rourke with cancer. Okay, that's the look. Okay, because seriously, I found out the hood rats are starting to like veer away from me. Because I'm starting to have that emaciated white trash look. Okay, I actually had these hoods.
Lunge at them and sink your fangs into them, right?
Right. So I'm starting to kind of like, I guess maybe I'm doing the Benjamin Button thing where I'm starting to regress.
You look hungry, like
Right. So I mean, these poor hood rats almost ran over this old lady going to the dollar store the other day, because they just looked at me and they like heard it in her direction and they're bumping into her to get away from me. It was kind of funny. So yeah, man, I experimented with being Carol O'Connor as the Buddha for, a couple of years. I guess I'm done with that.
all these references are passing me by, but I can tell you that I saw recently an article where these, forgive me for bringing this up, these macaque monkeys, which they previously thought were vegetarian, were walking up to trees, I think like Malaysia or somewhere like that, and reaching their hand in like the tree hollers and pulling out these tree rats and just eating them like whole, like you eat a popsicle. There's pictures, they're really, really like gut-wrenching pictures of chowing down, and I'm thinking you could do that with the hood rats,
Oh, wow. More souls are writhing in vegan purgatory as we speak. This is great.
James. Hood rats don't have souls. one thing you don't have to worry
I
about.
didn't say that.
Oh,
I didn't say that.
No, I just want to prevent any listeners getting confused. Caveat.
I mean, I have stopped short of accusing them of agency.
I mean, very conventional of you.
Yeah, that's something most of us don't have. I mean, I'm a woman, right? So no agency.
I got a funny story about that, actually. I hope you guys forgive me for it's a very brief vignette, because until I sort of understood women, but then when I had daughters, I really like stuff that I intellectually understood sunk in on a deeper level, because I understood that women really are sort of like alligators, in the sense that the difference between a little 6-inch alligator and a 6-foot alligator is just size. I mean, it's just like it's born with everything it needs to get through life. And the other day, what happens is, I start work at 4. Well, my kids come home from school at 2, and from kindergarten at 2. My older ones, my boy and girl. And my wife gets home at 4, and then we hang out for a couple of hours, do homework and, play and stuff. And they were hanging out, I was trying to take a nap, and they jumped in bed with me. And my son, he likes, playing with his mother's hair. He's got this thing. And he didn't have, he had his younger sister. He starts playing with her hair, and she says, no, don't, He says, then you're not my friend, and you can't play with my ball. And she says, and if I let you, I can? He goes, yeah, sure. She goes, fine, you can play with my hair. And just watching that negotiation transaction, I was like, wow, you have everything you need to get through life. You've got the basics right there. Just 3 years old, you understand how these things work.
Having kids, I have daughters only, but it does reveal, what the brain already comes packaged with. Just, it's all there. There's things that my kids do that they did when they were newborns, and they still do it. It's different. It's changed because they're bigger and they have words and stuff, but it's behaviors that they were born with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many children do you have now, Baruch?
I got 4, and I got one that's impending any day now.
All right.
Wow, congratulations. That's great.
Wow.
God willing.
Yeah.
I wish more of the guys that I coached were doing the same thing, but most of them are on the monastic path, one way or the other. We got one guy that's got more kids than all the rest of them put together. So somebody's got to do it. You're carrying the water for other people, I guess.
Yeah, well, I like it, man. I wouldn't trade for anything. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. And anybody that's kind of on the fence or thinking about it, I highly recommend it. And my neighbor said something interesting the other day. He said, like when you get married, your wife is like a mirror, But when you have kids, it's more in a mirror. Because a mirror you can choose to look at, you can choose to ignore. But with the kids, like everything comes right back at you, and you have no choice but to really see yourself from that third perspective. It's.
Hey, I've been enjoying your home improvement videos.
Yeah,
you
thank
guys, you. Yeah, and expanding your home because growing family. So that's really cool. You've been doing a lot of work. I watched it's like a garden and orchard and stuff like that. That's pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
I built a nursery too, and thank God, I didn't know anything about nurseries or whatever, but it went really well. Growing a bunch of trees and I got a bunch of orders, thankfully, and so hopefully we'll expand that, this winter. Got a lot of oak trees and black locust. James, I noticed when you write about nature, what you have of it in Baltimore very very precisely. And so I don't know if I'm sure you've got black locust out there because it grows everywhere. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
They're prominent in Harford County, about 30 miles northeast of Baltimore. Is where I've seen the most black locusts. There's actually a surprising amount of trees in Baltimore City. When you look over it, it's like a third of it is treetops. In the summertime, you can really tell.
Right. Well, hopefully it'll be reforested again soon.
Return to nature.
Well, you know, when I watched that show, Life After People on the History Channel, and they used Detroit as a case study on how long civilization would last if people just all of a sudden disappeared. I think of that every time I walk through areas of Baltimore now, and I see the big oaks and the giant birch trees just cracking the pavement and busting the sidewalks up. It's great.
I think people per se disappeared from Detroit several decades ago. What you're seeing now is life after hominids.
Oh, man. Stop. That's 2 strikes.
Huh?
2 strikes already. It's like 10 minutes.
I didn't say anything. You know, what do you mean, you people? I was talking about civilization. You know, I wasn't talking about color. I'm colorblind like the rest of us are, actually.
Hey, speaking of which, Kamala dropped out today, speaking of color.
Say what?
Kamala Harris.
Oh, no.
Kamala Harris is out of the race.
Here we go. The Irish can't get a break. Kamala Harris dropped out, so we got no more Irish in the presidential race. This is horrible.
Yeah.
It was that guilt about being descended from slave owners.
Yeah.
I think her and O'Rourke had all the Irish ancestry there, so I'm out in the cold once again.
Yeah. She had, pretty strong institutional support, so it's kind of surprising that she just vanished today. But she's gone.
Cracked her. Tulsi, I watched that little outtake of the debate, and it was, they shut her down, of course, afterwards. James, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. And she was the only one I wanted to look at on the debate. She was the only one that was worth looking at, and I was pretty much ignoring everybody else. They wouldn't give her any FaceTime, so I was kind of thinking about that.
She was the only hominid on that side of the aisle. I thought about it's not about race. It's about look. First of all, I try not to vote in here. I don't know if you guys know what's going on here. We're about to go to our third elections because the first 2 were inconclusive. They couldn't get a coalition together. And the difference was basically just colors of turds, but they hate each other so much that they can't get it together. And I'm very happy because anything that these people do when they have a coalition is bad. But, the right wing, quote unquote, and the left wing. But now this interim government, the right wing are spinning up for an election and they're going, man, we got to do something to get the suckers mobilized. So while they haven't really done anything hugely right, they're making moves in that direction. So I'm thinking if we can have another 3 or 4 inconclusive elections, several months apart, our right wing will actually be forced to act in a right wing fashion. Because otherwise, normally what they do is they go, guys, you got to vote for us or the Arabs and the leftists will take over. And then they get into office and they do things like, oh, hey, we created a Ministry of Social Equality, literally. Or whatever, we released 2,000 terrorists that all killed a bunch of Jews. We did this, that, and the other. And their voters are just, they're so dumb that they just vote for them again next time. But now, because of the short cycle, because they can't get a coalition together, so they have to go to another election, and it's happening for the third time right now, they're actually having to show something.
Okay, I want to tell people a little bit of background in case they don't know who you are.
Sorry.
No, I should have done it earlier. But Baruch is living in Israel, sort of, and so he's talking about Israeli elections. And I actually would love to get a kind of a baseline because also there's some charges against Bibi, and we have of course impeachment fund going on here, but what does it mean Does it mean anything to him, or he just carry on, or what's going on?
Wow, that's kind of like a question that we could talk for next hour about it, and you guys bored out of your mind.
No, don't give me the boring. Just give me the
Okay,
gossip. Okay,
fine,
he's
fine.
charged with
Here's-
some
here's- okay,
corruption.
okay.
Yeah.
Here's the background. We have a judicial system and the Supreme Court, which basically appoints itself. No elected officials really appoint them. No elected officials have any pull over the Attorney General or the various prosecutors' offices here. Okay. And by the way, here in Israel, there's no such thing as trial by jury, and there's no such thing as a right to a speedy trial. And so, about 30 years ago, we had a Supreme Court judge who sat over the Supreme Court named Baruch, and we don't have a constitution either. And he basically wrote, he issued a ruling that became sort of the Constitution. And the ruling was like this. He said that, first of all, everything is adjudicable, which means that the courts can decide anything. Second of all, you don't need standing in Israel, which means that if I think that you owe James money, I can sue James. I don't need to be
involved in any way. You can just
exactly.
Yeah. That's
which,
fun.
funny scenario. But if, for instance, a bunch of homosexual leftists decide that I am sitting on land which belongs to the Arabs, they can go and sue on behalf of those Arabs. And actually, that's
do they do that?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
Okay.
that's what's going on with us. We have a Supreme Court case from my
Here's
little
what
ramshack
you can talk about.
champion.
Here's something you can talk about is because I seen you post I think it was some IDF official account posted something about a girl who was vegan and she was worried about joining and made this video of how to make vegan people feel comfortable working in armed forces. So I want you to talk about pause, how Israel is paused. Yeah.
So that's going to tie in a little bit. But give me a sec.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that this Baruch guy said was that the function of the Supreme Court is to defend democracy against populism. Okay?
That's here. Yeah.
And the values of democracy are determined by the Supreme Court because they're very elite people that come from North Tel Aviv and so on and so forth. And that's his function. So the next step is that sporadically Israeli officials who don't play ball have investigations opened against them and sometimes go to jail. And a lot of times it's just, they didn't cut whoever needed to be cut in. Like we had our former president go to jail. We had a former prime minister in jail, just recently got out, and so on. And so Bibi, even though he's one of these, he's Bibi's not the Israeli Trump. Bibi's an Israeli swamp creature. Bibi's kind of I think he compared him to George Bush Sr., like that level.
Ooh, deep
of slimy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. But Bibi, has pissed these people off, and so they've opened an investigation, and and they open and close investigations just as a pressure tactic. They've opened an investigation. They want to put him in jail. He hasn't requested immunity yet. He has 30 days from now to request immunity. And it's kind of obvious that if he doesn't get back into, if he loses the prime ministership, which he's had for 12 years, then he's probably going to jail. As far as the IDF on every level past platoon commander, and probably even that level is very seriously paused. It's straight up transgender rights. We're the most vegan friendly army in the world. We love the Arabs and blah, blah, blah. And how could you shoot that terrorist? He was already on the ground. Now you're going to jail. All that stuff is an ongoing function. By the way, who knocks down Jewish houses is the IDF, or the border police, which is basically a branch of the armed forces. Because the way it works is there hasn't been a war for the existence of Israel since 1973. And so every war, it's kind of like in America, you go to Iraq and you're not going to lose a battle like Stalingrad, and your division's not going to be encircled and everything else. So if you want to make a career, do what the people in charge want you to do the way they want you to do it. and look like you're happy doing it. And so the religious Israelis, the religious Zionists, tried to get into the army and take it over by saying, well, we'll volunteer for the army and we'll volunteer to be officers, and then, eventually we'll rise to the top, and then we'll be in charge. And they did this very openly like 20 years ago. And so for the last 20 years, the Israeli army, especially the officer corps, has had to like double plus pause itself in order to filter these guys out. And I'll give you guys an example. In Judaism, as a man, you're not supposed to look at a woman's various areas that you're not supposed to look at, which is like everything between the knees and the collarbones. And you're not supposed to listen to a woman singing. Like there's various, like on the radio, maybe it's okay, whatever. But it's considered like an erotic thing you're not supposed, like a woman that's not your wife or your mom or something like that. You're not supposed to. Well, so if you are if you're going through the officer course in the IDF, like the infantry officer course, of course, you have cultural events. One of the cultural events is they put you in an auditorium and you have to listen to a lady singing. It's very essential, to be an infantry commander. You have to, and if you get up and you walk out or stick your fingers in your ears, like you're done.
Wow.
So,
that's really warfare, against tradition. And I mean, that's pretty remarkable to me. It's because that has to be intentional, right? I mean, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that wasn't like accidental.
It's not like you have a great opera tradition that you have to keep going. It's like a religious test, basically. Yeah, that's wild.
So it's an anti-religious test.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys have been doing it since, the creation of the IDF. Rabin, our prime minister, that got assassinated for giving land away to terrorists and actually bringing terrorists back from Tunisia and arming them. And then surprisingly, right, like that was our peace process. And surprisingly, they started killing Jews. It's really unbelievable. And then he got assassinated, but that was the end of his career. But the beginning of his career in 1948 was killing Jews also. There was a ship called the Alligator that was bringing arms to, the Irgun, which was more of a right-wing organization here, right at the beginning of the establishment of the state, and they sunk it and machine gunned them as they were swimming in the water. And that was Robin's operation. So this is nothing new. This is like an ongoing kind of cold civil war, I guess you'd call.
I see so many parallels with the United States that it's fascinating to me. What I see it is you just call it a cold civil. Was that what you said? Cold civil war? What did you say?
Something like that.
Yeah. I see it as a civil war inside the government. That's how I feel here in the United States, because you have like federal government, especially under Trump, which is trying really hard to do like immigration enforcement. And then you have all these municipalities are saying like, just nope, we're not gonna hand over any criminal, especially anyone who is subject to deportation. And you have, I mean, I just feel like every level of the government is people fighting each other. Yeah. And you observe this.
Definitely getting screwed. The Border Patrol has been victimized by other agencies.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
You guys got to consider like what kind of person goes into one of these things, and after like you're in there for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and you realize that the stuff you're doing is the opposite of the stuff you're nominally supposed to be doing, and it's the opposite of the stuff that you thought like you're going to be doing, and you stay in, and you go, oh man, I just gotta like another 15 years, and I'll get a retirement check or whatever. Like, what kind of person does that? The higher up you go, the worse they are.
The pension, I think, is the most powerful thing, the most powerful weapon.
You don't got to tell me. I was in the U.S. military for 10 years, counting reserve and National Guard service, 8 years of active duty, and I turned my back. I could have just hung out for another 10 years, and but I left. I don't have a high opinion of people that they understand the game and it runs contrary to what they want their values to be, but they just you can buy them for that pension.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, I know some people that couldn't hang in there for the pension after a similar amount of time that you spent, about a decade. And just like, can't do it anymore because it's going to be another decade of compromising their values. But I guess there's a lot of people that do make that call to stay in and compromise.
And well, that's how you end up with this ultra-paused organization, right?
Right, but it's also how you end up with sort of a demoralized organization because your best people kind of have this cognitive dissonance all the time, or they're just really cynical. I mean, look, my perspective was also like on one hand I was an enlisted guy, and I didn't have any you'll be a sergeant major. Well, okay, great, and on the other hand. Look, to me, part of being a man is being confident that you can provide for your family, you can survive. I got hands and I got a head, and even if I have to go and work a real worky job, I can still figure things out and make it. But a lot of people don't really have that mentality, and so they're very easy, because they're so alienated from that idea. They're very easy to manipulate. Think about it this way, right? We have all this technology, right? And you can produce incredible stuff just on a desktop. What's that?
My daughter's been drawing or painting.
Oh,
yeah,
very nice.
Painting.
What's that rake-like character on the left there?
I don't know. I think it's a person standing near flowers.
It's very like what's that guy's? How do you pronounce the guy's name? Munch?
Yeah, the Scream. Yeah,
Monk?
yeah. It's watery. It's very watery watercolors. So that's how they keep quiet usually when we're podcasting.
Very nice.
Thanks.
Pass my compliments.
Thank you. I will do that.
What were we on about?
The men having a lack of confidence and using their head in their hands to continue to provide for their family and selling their values out to stay in for a pension, I think was, pretty much the track that you were on.
I mean, am I wrong? I think you turned down the management track because you didn't want to be doing the moral dirty work, right?
I turned down 13 promotions to get up in management, partially because I didn't approve of the way management and retail food usually operates. And I also knew that I would have a really horrible workforce because I worked with these guys. So it wasn't just a moral decision. I did say yes one time, but I only did it because I went from being bottom man on a chain store night crew to actually being the general manager of an independent supermarket. So I skipped like all these 7 levels in between and just went right to the top. So that was like too much for me to say no to. So that's kind of like my downfall right there. I just went for the sack of gold, but I gained 10 pounds a year for 4 years straight. It was eating my soul. I had nightmares for the last 6 months. I woke up every night in the middle of the night having nightmares, and I just had to go because it was getting to the people I was working for were breaking the law. They weren't just doing stuff that was immoral.
Oh, no, not breaking the law.
They were actually breaking the law on top of doing immoral stuff. And it actually came together. It was like the same thing, and they were actually breaking, with morality and the law, which they don't always go together. But yeah, so I just had to go. But I managed to choke on that for about 4 years. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it any more than that. It certainly aged me. I started to slip mentally.
That tells me two interesting things. First of all, it speaks very highly of those people. They will be able to look at the bottom guy on the night crew and make that sort of unconventional leap, and go, we should put him in charge of this whole operation. I mean, that's really some Wild West stuff out there, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
I was totally unqualified.
I mean, like that doesn't
happen
unusual,
if
right?
you have like a normal HR department. That someone can make that decision in that case, but I think what you're trying to say is that you can't. That's a very unusual corporate occurrence.
Yeah, well, see, after this was a separate company, so I was working for a chain, and the management guys would keep on trying to get me on the management track, and I refused to do it. There was an independent supermarket that I consulted for just because I was good at setup. And they ended up seeing me in that mode. I wasn't a night crew guy for them. I was a guy coming in to actually manage their setup because their co-op that they bought from didn't provide that service. So I was doing it. I had a lot of experience setting up stores for grand openings working for this chain. So then over the course of 3 months, the owners got the idea after seeing me, because I ended up having to train their night crew because these guys needed to be able to know how to manage a setup. And they were like, wow, we'd like you to run the store and train more people. So yeah, it was unconventional, but it was a private thing.
Okay. And the other thing that's like the fact that their setup was able to inflict that level of stress on you, like I'd understand if, like your supermarket was doing drone strikes on weddings or something like that. But like napalm in Baltimore kindergartens is part of their retail strategy. But how, and you're not like you're not, you know what I mean? Like you're not like one of the like Sex and the City type high strung ladies or something like that. How were they able to inflict that level of mental stress on you by making you fire people?
Yes, it ended up coming to that, but it started from the get-go. They hired me to replace their parents and their older brothers, 2 sisters, 2 rich girls that didn't really know much about running the supermarket that had inherited it. And they told me at this meeting, right when we finally decided on a dollar figure, that my job was going to be twofold. It was going to be to force them, those 2, force them to change the way they do business so that they don't lose their business, because they realized, even though they didn't want to change the way they did business because they're creatures of habit and they're very emotional, they realized that they had to change. And I was supposed to force them to do this. I was basically replacing both of their parents and their older brother, okay, and who had passed away. And the other thing was I was to negotiate between the 2 of them because they both hated each other. And one of them's the CFO and the other one's the CEO. And I would just be the salaried stand-in for the non-existent COO. And I was to negotiate with both of them separately, then try to go back and forth between their offices and negotiate the settlement without them 2 having to sit at the table and scream at each other. So that was base level. And then eventually, one of the women ends up dating a guy that negotiates the hiring of a security man, because I really needed a security guy, somebody I could work with. And this guy ended up being a guy that couldn't keep his hands off the female staff. And letting him go would have reflected badly on the guy that was nailing the CEO, okay, on the off hours, and messed up with her sex life. And that was a no-go thing. So what they decided to do is every one of the women that this dude felt up or said crude stuff to, they were just going to fire her. And ask you. And this, right. And also at the same time, this guy was also harassing some of the men, because if you were a good looking young dude working in this store, this guy wanted you out of there. So the good looking guys, he starts trying to frame them up for stuff that they didn't do, and he's picking fights with them and everything. So I end up being the defense attorney for these guys over here who were members of my crew who I trained. It just became a total mess. And I could see that I'm going to end up, through depositions or testimony, I'm going to end up sinking this whole place in a class action lawsuit, because I can definitely tell that's in the works, because now they've let 5 of these chicks go. Okay. So it became like a total disaster. I just had to say, okay, I can't be here for this.
You ever consider working in an industry that had less subhumans in it?
Well, of the 110 employees, I think I think
Well,
10 of them did not have a criminal record, and of those 10, only about 5 of them were drug addicts. Okay, so there was
no,
there was
morality's fine, but or you gotta remember, I'm a Russian, so like that's like scaring an Eskimo with snow. But no, I'm just like what, like generally anything where you have like when you got machinery running all the time that depends on you to run it competently, and that if you screw up will rip your head off.
That's true.
That requires like a cut of human that's somewhat above that.
Yeah.
Like
That's a great
you
criterion.
can't, like if you're sexually harassing your heavy equipment operator, you might just drop a bulldozer blade on you by accident, or whatever. Dude.
Well,
Sounds
it was an ego. It was an ego thing for me. Okay,
You
I
want to see
realized I was only going to get direct control of 1/3 of the store, but that was I had a challenge of being able to save a business that I was only going to be able to fix 1/3 of, and I did. I actually managed to their gross margin went 3.5 points. And their payroll went from 16.6% down to 12.4%, which is horrible for a chain store. I'd have got fired having anything higher than 10 working for a chain, but I was able to drop it with only controlling scheduling of 1/3 of the employees. I was able to drop the payroll down from 16.6 to 12.4. I upped the gross $30,000 to $50,000 a week, which was like 10 to 15%, depending on the week. I basically did that with my own back. Okay, I would just put this stuff up. So it was a challenge to see if I could do it, and I did it. They actually talked me into staying longer than the 18 months I'd originally signed on for, because I was just there to train people to take over for me and train the crew. And then the last straw for me is a guy named Kevin Richardson, who was a real good dude. He was a black guy from North Carolina. He was actually a civilized human being. And I trained him to be my replacement. And they actually fired him so that I wouldn't leave. I walked them downstairs after they did that to him. I was the only person that voted against it out of this panel of my other assistants and the owners and everything. And I walked them downstairs and I gave them all the money I had in my wallet. And I said, look, here's my phone number. I'll give you a stellar reference anywhere you go. That's basically when I signed out mentally and just started looking for the door, because they did that just to keep me there, because they trusted me to be able to deal with their insanity. And they knew that Kevin wasn't going to be able to manage them. I was actually, in the end, my job was to manage these two crazy bitches, not just manage the store, and they knew Kevin wasn't up to that. So that's when I signed off, basically. Yeah, it was just insane, dude. And I got suckered that my ego kept me there for too long, and it started to affect my mental health. So after that thing happened with Kevin, I just started saving all my money, and then I quit on July 5th, and I took the money and gave it to my youngest son and started writing full time.
This is like reading a memoir by some colonel, like advisory position during the Vietnam War, basically.
Losing battle for sure.
No, but look at these battles we won, and like you have to work for idiots, and it's heartbreaking. But on the other hand, we're proud of that one time that we, wiped out a regiment of Viet Cong, etc. And but then we gave the hill right back to them, and left, and I take it again 3 times. Blah blah. This is something I wanted to touch on. It's kind of there's a quintessential American experience there, right? Where if you're a competent and basically decent dude working in an incompetent and immoral bureaucracy, on one hand, it depends on you and guys like you to continue functioning. On the other hand, by virtue of its functioning, it demoralizes and drives you away. So there's been, in the last few podcasts, you guys have been bringing up something that I've been thinking about, and I'm sure a lot of other people, which is that this whole system is, I'm talking the modern West, of course, is disgusting and alienating, dehumanizing. But on the other hand, it seems very, very stable inherently. And so, and there's no more barbarians, right? There's no more Huns or whatever that are going to. I was speaking to Mencius Moldbug a few years ago, and he said, well, listen, basically the Romans, degenerated to the point where these Neanderthal throwbacks from the north came and wiped it all out, which was fundamentally a good thing in the sense that it represented a victory of virtue over vice. And while I don't agree with that really, but I completely sympathize. But there's no more steppe Huns. Right. The Uyghurs are getting their little bit of re-education and so on and so forth. So the only way that we can see it collapsing is some sort of cataclysmic event, right? A Carrington event, a big coronal outburst, or I don't know, the sweet meteor of death was like one of the Twitter candidates. You guys remember?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've heard that a lot. I've had a lot of emails signed "Sweet Meteor of Death."
Right, like that's what it means. Like nobody really wants to, like eat a meteor, but on the other hand, like nobody really wants to get mandatory, hormone replacement therapy assigned to them by the courts for saying something intolerant either.
It's hard to imagine where we're going from here, right? Because, and this we talk about, where either is a big cataclysm, everything's going to fall apart, and it's just going to be like Wild West warlords, huge die-off, massive, famine and death, or what seems more likely to me is just, this incremental advancement of like global homopause. I don't know. I mean, what's going to stop it besides, a meteor? And you propose maybe there has to be a certain number of competent people, right?
Yeah.
I propose two things. One kind of top down, one bottom up. Bottom up, realistically, just objectively, it's never been easier to make stuff, grow stuff, be self-sufficient. I mean, I have, I work with something called an Arduino, which is like some little $10 electronic chip, and I can use this thing and program it to, drive anything from an irrigation system to a robot. And anybody can. I mean, it's easy. There's 3D printers.
No, you can.
No. I can, but why can't I? Because I have this massive
cranium full of brains.
No, that's horse shit. Because if you can grasp the operations of a supermarket and the mental functioning of the dozens of subhumans assigned to it, you can, like this stuff is simple. If you can work on a car, like a 1970s car, and I know that most dudes out there have the capacity to do that. I mean, everything including engine rebuilds. Then this stuff is super simple. So why don't people do it? Why are they off there? Well, because they have learned helplessness, because they've been trained that the easy thing to do is to go to your horrible job and then go home and watch porn or whatever it is you do, snort some Oxycontin. And because it's alienation and learned helplessness. But that's not like some kind of innate thing. It's a matter of, it's very hard to make the personal choice that you can rehabilitate yourself. But you can, right? So that's the bottom up. The top down view is precisely what James just explained, if I understand correctly, which is that what we talked about, right? The system destroys its own foundations. It eats itself out from year to year. And therefore, the magnitude of the shock that it takes to get it to collapse is smaller and smaller. And also, it looks at you through a toilet paper tube, right? Like it doesn't have this panopticon. That doesn't exist. I mean, if we're talking, oh, what's that? I'm seeing a volcano. Is that the Yellowstone caldera? Magnet chamber?
Yeah. This is a herd of unicorns. Beautiful unicorns.
You read the bedtime stories by Uncle Hakan?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I hope he comes back to Twitter.
It's Hakan. I really, He wasn't very fond of us, though. I think,
Your people.
But he was entertaining enough.
Yeah.
Hello there.
This is my older child. She likes to say hi. Younger child does not like to say hi. We're
So it's looking at us through a toilet paper tube. The
Yes,
system is. It's
the
not looking on
tunnel
the
vision,
spectrum.
right?
Exactly. And it's so hampered by its bureaucratic processes. I remember I was sitting in Iraq in an operations room with a special forces team, and you have a big screen. You show like various mission briefings and so on and so forth. But the rest of the time, guys will like hook up a movie to it, and we were watching The Bourne Identity, or one of those awful movies, and I said, guys, in real life, it wouldn't be like, okay, yeah, go get me a kill order of that guy. What would happen is they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, right. Okay, we'll hand carry that paperwork up to the 9th floor and then to the 11th floor. And within 2 or 3 weeks, we'll get that kill order, hopefully. Maybe. We'll try to line up a really good PowerPoint with the second and third order side effects and do our little like risk assessments and so on and so forth. And and everybody fell out of their chairs laughing, not because I'm hilarious, but because that's exactly how this shit works. And it's exactly that efficient. And these guys are real, like, tip of the spear, really, like tier 2 guys, in 2008 in Iraq, going out on missions every other night. And so imagine how much worse it is there in the States, probably here in Israel too. Because you have courts and you have this and you have that, I just don't buy this, like this whole thing, like where every citizen is like a little bug under a microscope. Because who's looking through the microscopes? Who's squashing the bugs? Guys that are first of all, they're demoralized, and there's not a lot of them.
The one thing I can actually comment on, because we kind of used the supermarket as an analogy for the system. That supermarket did not go out of business when I left it. And when I walked out the door, they lost 30,000 gross a week. Their payroll started to go up again. So they fired 15 people. And they've outsourced. They couldn't figure out how to work their center store, and they knew they weren't going to get somebody with my ability. So they rented to a dollar store. They gave up their center store business. They gave it to a dollar store. They rented part of their space to a pharmacy. They just brought in outside companies to set up shop in their area and handle things where they knew they weren't going to have the intrinsic ability to do it, because they had such a demoralized and idiot staff. So, things can keep on limping along for a while, even when it gets past the point where the people running it thought it was going to collapse before. How many libertarian economists thought that this thing would still be rolling now? The way it's going now.
Yeah, people really thought the world was going to end in 2008. And I am one of these people who, such a nerd, when I was in 8th grade taking civics class, learned about the national debt, which was then maybe had just broken $1 trillion or something. And I thought, oh, this is very, very bad. This is going to have big bad consequences and stuff. And it has had bad consequences, but it's all been so gradual and incremental, right? The devaluation of the currency and the exportation of an entire manufacturing base and all this stuff is probably related to the central banking, but it's happened slowly but surely. Just happens.
Well, something's happening. But on the other hand, I don't really see, again, I go to the States, thankfully not often, and I don't see a lot of starving people. And I don't see a lot of people that, in Judaism, you have to say a blessing when you put on a new article of clothing. And the reason is that back, not so long ago, that for most people, that was a big deal. Like you got new pants, it was huge.
Yeah.
I don't see. So how long can this thing keep going theoretically?
Long time, right?
But I don't think so.
No? You feel it's coming?
No, I don't think so because I'm a religious man. And so, and I really look at things from a religious perspective, and there's things that go far beyond like materialism. I don't believe that like inflation of the dollar is going to do it, because inflation dollar hasn't been really happening so much. What's been happening is the velocity of money's dropped because people are less. Martin Armstrong, who we discussed, talks about this, that, you know, if interest is at 10%, but I have a feeling that, you know, I can make, you know, enough to pay back 20, I'll take a loan at 10%. And if interest is at 0.5%, but I don't really see a future in, you know, where I can make, you know, 1%, I'm not going to take that loan out. I don't care. And so the velocity's been dropping because people's confidence has been dropping, but inflation hasn't been going on. What's going on is that people are alienated from the source of life, and so they stop. I talk about the rat heaven experiment a lot. You guys know about that? James, you know about the rat heaven experiment?
The beautified mice.
Yeah, the Calhoun.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
Where the mice stopped breeding and they started grooming themselves.
They stopped having babies.
With the overcrowding.
Yeah, the females would like barricade against the males and didn't want to have babies or eat their babies. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very analogous. I agree. Yeah.
And they had everything they needed.
Right. They were just overcrowded, essentially, right?
Well, materially they had what they needed, you know. But you mentioned in our email exchange that the tree of life's been hollowed out with this whole atheistic process that we've been going through. Right. I think that was the point that you were getting at. So yeah. So even if it looks like it's impossible to starve in this country, I even had a dominatrix offer to buy me dinner on the train out to Utah. Okay, and I declined because she didn't see me eating. Okay, and she saw the way I was traveling, and she thought I was a homeless guy. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm kind of homeless, but I'm just fasting. And she's like, no, you just don't want me to feel sorry for you. Let me buy you dinner. You know, so it's difficult to starve in this nation. I constantly have people pushing food at me. So yeah, but how long can it go if it's rotten?
Right. People don't have, you know, yeah. And
there are plenty of grocery store analogies to that. You know, you can have a well-stocked produce counter, but if you haven't rotated any of this fruit and it's just rotten from the middle, how long are people going to come buy from it?
Yeah. And the population density, you know, I mean, mice, you know, maybe, but, you know, it's not like once they started dying off, the population density dropped a certain amount and then they started having kids again. They were just done.
That's right.
I think what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was it was like a permanent effect. They did not recover. Yeah.
Because they lost a certain something. You know, like in nature, you know, mice always have to. You always have some kind of motivation because at least you're hungry. You know, you're scared. You want to mate. This and that, the other. Right. That's life as a mouse. But here they didn't have any of that. So probably they had this existential question like, hey, what do we live for? Right? On some level, whatever that means for a mouse. I see what it means for people because, you know, I'm on Twitter. I see these guys. They don't have a reason to live, but dying is scary and suffering is scary. And so they want to somehow anesthetize themselves until the inevitable takes place.
Well said. There's plenty of that. That was everybody I worked with in those supermarkets.
Mm-hmm.
Limping along until the end and trying not to experience too much of the sorrow along the way, at least any more than they could immediately handle. So there's a big rush to the bar or the drug corner, or both, after work.
Right. Suffering is the ultimate evil, you know.
Yeah.
Boredom and suffering.
And there were some industrious employees who would manage to get hired drunk on the job. You know, so figure out how to make that happen. But yeah. It was like being the guy cracking the whip in some cartoon hell. It was really bizarre.
Now, meth was not a big thing in Baltimore, was it?
It
Meth
has
still
never.
isn't, right?
No.
Because meth
Whoever.
makes you industrious.
What's that?
Because meth makes you industrious.
Maybe that's it. Whoever is in charge of the drug trade in Baltimore they have not permitted meth in it. It's one of the only places in the U.S. I've heard of. It just doesn't have it. I mean, it's right up in, it's 45 miles north in Pennsylvania. Okay. It's 50 miles west in West Virginia. It's over in Delaware, 40 miles away.
I believe we've identified a market gap here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk to that one white guy. What's that one white guy's name? Kayvon White? You could talk to him and have him bring you on as an independent consultant of sorts.
Terrence White. The guy that should be president of the United States. The one that knocked up the 4 prison guards. Head of the Black Gorilla family.
Yes. I think you can talk to him, and this is fit in well with your what was it, your Omega Man theory?
Yeah.
This would dovetail nicely with that, and I think it would be much less stressful than managing the supermarket for those people, because I think in the Black Gorilla family, if you act like that, you probably just get shot. Yeah, and I guarantee that I would probably get along a lot better with Terrence White than I would those two crazy rich bitches. Of course. No doubt. It off great.
Okay, let me bring in a subject in then, okay? Baruch, you said
out of this one.
No, it's the same. It's the same. Let's talk about. I want to talk about cartels.
What's your egress plan here?
Cartels. Okay, here. Look, Baltimore is unique. Yes, it's unique because you can see the total insanity of it, right? Like, you can see that the police department is 100% corrupt. The municipal government is 100% corrupt. The population is among the lowest quality of hominids you can find on Earth. And but so you sent an article about the cartels, which I didn't even get to the cartel part in that article. I just didn't do it. But Trump recently said maybe like that cartels are going to be considered terrorist organizations. And this is a question I've had before. Like, cartels are really scary in Mexico. They are present in the United States. They're not, and you saw my Twitter thread on this, right? So my theory and my hypothesis is that, like in the case of Baltimore, you have PD and municipal government acting in the doing what the cartels are doing in Mexico. So we don't need cartels because we have enough corrupt local governments. We probably have federal agency involvement in the drug trade, right? Domestically. And so this is why I think something like a cartel is absent from the United States.
What do you think, Bert?
Well, who said they're absent? I mean, look, these guys are fundamentally a business organization, and the business organization, responds to risk reward, right? It does its calculations. In Mexico, when the government's basically non-functional and, on any level, apparently, I mean, I don't know, I've been to Mexico once and it seemed like a nice place, but according to what the newspapers say, if the government's not functional on any level and, you have a bunch of competition, you don't have any arbiter, right? Then you got to do things like cut people's heads off and, like play football with them and stuff.
Tower of skulls.
Because they'll do it to you. But if you do that stuff in America has a functional government and a functional justice system. And even if you do it in Baltimore and you go too much over the top and you start, doing that to people that somebody cares about, like a judge in Baltimore, you're gonna get rolled up instantly.
But didn't
that paper tube is going to be pointed at you. So if you're going to be bringing massive quantities of dope into the U.S., you have to do it in a more subtle way. I'm not saying that there's not like feds covering for these guys, probably, but I don't think they're like they do the stuff in Mexico because they're mean or because they go, hey, it'd be a funny thing to go skin some guy's face. They do because they got it.
I was 2 nights ago. I was approached by 2 guys. One guy was hiding behind a tree, and the other guy was coming up behind me, and they had me in the middle. And the guys, he didn't look like a fat-headed Guatemalan or Mexican. He had kind of like a narrow head, and so did the other guy. So I don't know what they were. And
Phallic.
The guy behind me is
calipers.
right. I didn't stay in for the physiognomy test. So, and he's saying onesie stuff. And I get the idea that he's asking me if I want the stuff. So I eventually shake my head no. And then when he leaves and he crosses behind me, the guy across the street that was hiding behind a tree, they just both glide off and they link up like 50 yards down. They were behaving very subtly. And this is the first time I've seen guys who aren't African Americans operating in a sales capacity in the local drug trade. I believe they were trying to sell something to me. I don't think that they were trying to attack me. But even if they were doing that, they were doing it subtly. Even if they were trying to attack me, they were doing it very subtly. They didn't come to me shoulder to shoulder. So yeah, and there's, for the first year since I've been keeping track, killings in East Baltimore are right up there with West Baltimore, and East Baltimore is now virtually all Latino. And the BPD has basically stopped reporting the race of victims that are slain. So I do think that there's a subtle infiltration of these people, the Spanish-speaking drug movers into Baltimore, and I think they are partially somebody in law enforcement is covering for them at some level. The press is covering for them at some level, and you know what? They minded their manners with me. These guys didn't want to fight with me. They wanted what they want, and when they didn't think they're going to get it, they just glided on like two ghosts. So,
right on.
I guess they have a part to play in the future that's developing.
They're way more utilitarian for sure. You wrote something about you described going to a beach on the East Coast, I believe, in Long Island, and you talked about like the feral children of civilization skulking around with like their faces scrunched up with hatred and envy.
Yeah.
Resentment. That level of just like irrational resentment and stupidity. And, the cartels don't have that. I don't think even like Tavon White or anybody else would have that. I mean, these guys are basically fundamentally deep down losers. Now, something interesting about Trump, right? Like, Trump has got himself sort of a problem. He's got a bunch of problems. One of the problems he has is that he's got to play this narrative of like the good American people versus the swamp. But a lot of the American people, TM, are basically what you described in the supermarket, or the guys that those dolichocephalic south of the border guys were pushing out of their niche.
Right.
They're soup fields. Like when the Europeans discovered Australia and they started bringing all these animals that had gotten used to life in Eurasia, and these things showed up and they were like, what is that? Well, it's kind of like a deer type thing, but if deer were really stupid and incompetent, like a whole continent full of loser species. And that's, what's that? That's lunch. Except for kangaroos. Kangaroos are impressive. But, in general, right? Like that's because they didn't have any competition. So where was I going with this? Right. Trump, even though he like basically knows this about Americans because he's been providing like lowbrow entertainment for them. And, like, watch this. These dumb shits are going to eat this up.
So true.
So like Trump knows this very well, but he's got to play this game, of like, oh, you good people, it's just these swamp dwellers that are, they're bad, and so, like, well, drugs are bad, so let's go after the cartels. But the problem is not the cartels, and the problem is not the Chinese, like, sending over, elephant-sized quantities of fentanyl. The problem is these shitty people that they have the opportunity to do anything. You can go and grow, get some trailer plot in the back 40 and grow tilapia and cucumbers and survive off that, on 10 hours of work a week off your disability payment. But no, they want to go get high, right? Because they've had potential stolen from them before they were even born. And Trump cannot address that by definition because he needs these dumb shits to keep voting for him.
Well, yeah, I mean, the voting, I don't know that the voting is that much connected to it, but Trump can't address it because he can barely do anything. Given the structure of our government, and you mentioned Moldbug earlier, I predicted when Trump won the election. I have an uncle who is extreme, lifelong Republican, loves Trump, loves everything. I told him, there's not a dozen people in Washington who are going to help Trump carry out his agenda. Trump can't do anything. He's done a lot considering, the whole swamp idea that's there. But then you talk about, the average American, the quality but the spiritual health, like the mice or the rats in the experiment, it's a chicken and egg question. And you talk about China. China is holding a grudge from 100 years ago. There's no doubt in my mind that China it is fighting a battle in the opium wars right now. I mean, it would be extremely naive to think that it's coincidence, right?
Well, the States are sending over junk food over there, so the States is fighting the insulin wars.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And the obesity rate there's going sky high. I saw, by the way,
worldwide.
today.
Africa.
Right. I was driving to Jerusalem today, and I saw a big billboard in Arabic, and what was on this billboard was like a bottle of Coca-Cola and some breadsticks and like 2 Pizza Hut pizzas. It was a billboard for Palestinian Pizza Hut, and I was torn. I was like, on one hand, like, good for you people, scarf that down. You can't really waddle around with a knife in your hand too fast.
It's domestication. It's human domestication.
Your stupid motorized fat man scooter.
Every government is
scarf it up.
Every government, every state has this motivation to domesticate its people, to feed them crippling and fattening diets.
They love it.
Yes, but of course, yeah. The subjects of domestication.
No, but they're voluntary. They're like that
Yes.
half retarded wolf that came staggering out of the tundra, like 30,000 years ago. Was like, hey, can I eat some of this garbage?
Exactly. The ducks, when they're trying to make the ducks get the fatty liver that's so delicious, the ducks run towards the guy with the stuffing the turkey baster down his throat. They don't mind it. They like it.
But again, like, this is something that we haven't brought up. We're fundamentally different from ducks because we're humans and there's such a thing as God. And it's, repentance and return to God is available to almost every human being. So I think that's the key. But obviously Trump cannot, even if Trump had, a government that was completely loyal to him, the problem I mentioned could not be addressed by Trump. Trump couldn't do it unless, not Trump as we know him, certainly.
Right. Yeah, it would require something entirely
if Mexico,
different.
If the sweet meteor of death hit Mexico and China, and every ounce of dope in the U.S. evaporated tomorrow, these people would go and huff gasoline, or they would use pornography, or they would find something. They'd carve pornographic statuettes out of concrete. I don't know, and use that to dope themselves up somehow. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. Everything else is a symptom. Like I live in a trailer, man. I drive a vehicle from 1996. All right. It's not that I had like a suitcase of money fall into my lap and I could afford to start this luxury lifestyle where I had a bunch of kids and was growing stuff in a nursery. I'm breaking like blocks of stone with basically hand tools, et cetera, and so forth. It's not, if I can do it, it's not that inaccessible to people. People don't want it.
I agree.
They want that with the breadsticks.
Yeah, it's something deeper that people either just can't imagine or they can't find it in themselves that they don't want it. And, everybody who listens knows that my family are immigrants. And I remember how urgent it was for us to do well in school. And I would look at my friends who were Americans, and one of them, the mom even told my mom, like, well, your kids work really hard because they have to prove themselves. My kid doesn't have to do that. You know, she's going to have a career and a life, and it's going to be pretty simple for her. And as it turns out, in the space of my lifetime, that's no longer true in America, where just by being a normal average American, you can have a satisfying life. But there is that hunger. The hunger isn't there. You know, the hunger that we had because we were poor immigrants. And that, you know, that hunger isn't even in immigrants anymore, because there's luxury in the life of an illegal immigrant or a legal immigrant in legal or illegal in the United States. There's such a surfeit of resources and calories and everything that you don't see that hunger.
First of all, before we go any further, I want to point out how important that what Baruch said is that, you know, we're used to sexism and racism, and I've even heard speciesism, but Baruch introduced the concept of continentalism. Okay, we basically impugned an entire continent except for the kangaroo. Okay, so
every living creature on that continent.
we have added something.
What?
Their factory area is 25% bigger than that of the rest of the human species. They can find their way to water holes by sense of smell from 50 miles away. I never impugned the Aborigines.
The Aborigines.
And cassowary, which is a giant bird that can disembowel you with one blow from its hook. All the other species in Australia, if you're listening, I stand by what I said. I don't feel sorry for you at all.
All the poisonous spiders they have. Okay. They have really poisonous spiders and snakes and stuff, right?
All that venomous stuff.
The spiders and the giant saltwater crocodiles. You guys get a pass. Are you working for the Australian fauna?
Australian Tourism Board?
Are you a lobbyist?
We need sponsors for this podcast. Maybe we can get some Australian bucks.
Oh, if I was working on behalf of Australian tourism, I might actually be an employee of the People's Republic of China. Now, I was at a medical facility yesterday. A friend of mine had to get a medical procedure, and it's a really well-run place. And you sit in the waiting room. You have to show up with somebody with you, or else they won't do this outpatient operation on you. So I came along with this lady, and there's 4 groups in there. And it was actually 4 men and 4 women. And the nurse comes, and one nurse takes her away. Another nurse comes in and gives you this whole briefing, what the screen's going to look like. She's going to come right back, and then she's going to make sure you can get into the recovery to see her as soon as possible. Okay, so it's a very well set up thing. So there's myself, there's a Hindu couple, there's a Muslim couple, and there's an African American couple. Okay, the Hindu guy is nervous and agitated the whole time. He won't stop chattering, even though there's a no cell phone policy in this little room, but he's really upset. And he chatters on and on until somebody finally puts him out of his misery, and they come and they take him to see his wife. The Muslim guy pretty much ignores the nurse while she's talking to him. Then the nurse directs him to take his wife's purse. His wife gets up to go with the nurse, and the nurse says to him, "I will be right back to get you." Okay, she leaves. The Muslim guy just walks out. The nurse comes back 10 minutes later looking for him. He doesn't give a shit. Wherever he's going, I don't know. He just disappears. Then the African American dude, his girl that he's with is on her way to get operated on. She's not 15 feet into the hallway outside of this door, and this attractive African American nurse starts walking by out of the nurse's station into the hallway, and he hits on her. He tries to get a date on her. Tries to get a date with her. Okay, so there's like this extremely different conditioning on behalf of these different groups of people that would just so obvious. And then the whole place was organized according to this racial hierarchy. The guy that tried to get a new girlfriend while his girl's headed to surgery, those guys are all pushing the wheelchairs around. And it goes all the way up to like the Korean, Chinese, Japanese guy that's the anesthesiologist and so on. But then all the propaganda is in direct opposition to this. There's not a single unified racial family in any of all the examples of families together are all mixed race families. Okay. And they all have 2 children. The only same race family is a mixed race family where there's a mulatto man who looks like he could be a movie star and a mulatto woman looks like she could be a beauty pageant person, and they have 1 kid. The ordinary looking families that are Caucasian men or Caucasian women with red and blonde hair with African American men, and these like really washed out looking children, they're not quite as good looking as the family that only has 1 child. It was really interesting the way the whole system is kind of set up against itself, because it's not what's being presented and all the propaganda for the patients. It's not how the organization is run. And the behavior of the patients kind of reflects the trust levels in the organization. So it was a great social study, but I almost laughed out loud when the brother hits on this chick, like as his girl's like limping down the hall, probably 15 feet away. And the Muslim guy's like, I don't care if she dies. I'm out of here.
The Muslim people's going home to somebody's got to watch the kids. And the black dude he needs an insurance policy. What if that girl doesn't make it out of surgery? Okay. Like, who's he going to stay with? You got to be more empathetic to the plight of these co-specifics.
You're correct.
Like what happens if, listen, I'm, me and my wife are like, we're like, look, like what happens when you have this kid, I mean, it's been entertaining, every kid, one of them, I was in the ambulance and my daughter was born like in the ambulance, and the paramedics were volunteer paramedics, and they kind of like passed her off to me like a football, and we're like, okay, dude, go up to the 9th floor, hand it over to preemie ward. And I was like, okay, no problem. And they freaked out, and every time it's been something different, but now we got 4 kids at home, so we got like my wife's like, I'm sentimental about it. She's like, listen, I'll go in the ambulance and you stay home with the kids, so.
Well, so I guess I should give Abdul and Tyrone a pass.
Yes, exactly. It's just different evolutionary strategies, all.
Right.
You don't get angry at hyenas for not eating bananas, man.
And I will not forget what the girl that the prospective new hood rat girlfriend said. Here's a nurse. She said, "Baby, I got an even better profile. You want me to turn sideways?" And she was on the stand. And he's like, "Yeah." And he gets out his phone and he's like videoing her and she's modeling. It was so tacky.
What a great healthcare system. I think there's actually probably more black doctors on TV than there are in real life. I mean, I think it's like, at least it's an order of magnitude. Wait, you can't say that.
I shouldn't.
You're supposed
I'll
to
cut that out.
No, don't cut it. You own it.
No, I can't. Loser channel. There is I've brought this story up before, but there is this Indian man who his sister is like a famous actress, Mindy Kaling, I think, and he was supposed to go to medical school. He didn't really want to, but he was expected to do it, and all his pals who were 1 year ahead of him in school were having a really hard time, so he realized that he wasn't going to get in. So he shaved his head and he applied. He marked himself down as African American, and he got in.
He was an undercover.
Yeah. So just think about the implications when you're in the hospital, looking around at your people who are going to look after you.
So now you're trying to more of that great story of heroism there.
Well, I mean, this girl, I guess she wasn't actually providing any serious medical care. Maybe she was like marking down, I don't know what her job was, but obviously.
Medication dosages.
There was a very clear hierarchy. This was a Kaiser Permanente, and it was the same as my operation situation, where there was a very clear, ethnic hierarchy in the medical establishment. That seemed to actually be pretty functional. Everything seemed to work pretty good. There's certain people.
No. This is I don't accept this. This is actually a perfect example of what will undergo a slow and gradual and inexorable decay because of affirmative
see where the
action.
decay is going to come, because what's on the bottom is going to get pushed up to the top.
Yeah, because it's going to get to the point really soon, and you're probably already there in some places, where going to the doctor is going to be a big gamble about whether you really should or not, if you're depending on how seriously ill you are. And
that's the way you're right now.
It's true right now, just because of the nature of medicine, but it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, much, much, much worse.
You know what the situation here in Israel is? In the medical system?
Tell.
Everything either costs either it costs $5,000 or it'll take you 5 months, and you can have it for free in 5 months. We can have it now for $5,000. Now the doctors and nurses, the ones holding things together, are mostly Russians, like former Soviet Union ones. Because, we have a socialist medical system, and they came here, they were like, 30, 40, like, what else are they going to do? Go work construction? But when they retire, like, it's going to be very interesting. Arabs get into medical school, they don't need, like, the equivalent of the SAT test here. They don't need, there's not a cutoff. For Jews, there's a huge one. They get pushed through. And also, if you're an Arab and you come back from Jordan or Bulgaria or whatever with some piece of paper that says you're a doctor or a dentist, they accept that. So you go in and you're dealing with these dudes, and you ever see Idiocracy, the movie?
Oh yeah.
First place in the hospital. It's not that bad, but it's pretty entertaining. So, you gotta, but again, like that's like the fundamental like mindset. Like I'm a man. So if there's a system that's got functional pockets, I'm going to get in there and like sweet talk to Russian doctors and nurses or whatever, like quickly identify like in the army or anywhere else. I imagine jail is like this. Everywhere I've been is like this. You figure out who's who very quickly by making broad sweeping judgments. And then you talk to the people that are capable of helping you, and then you figure out what it takes to get them to help you. And because people are fundamentally good, it's not that hard to get them to help you usually. Americans actually also, most places in America, I don't know, man. It's not like that. Even that one nurse that was showing off her quote unquote profile to that brother, she probably didn't have that like DMV level of contempt for you for being white or whatever, right?
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, she was fairly civilized. Yes. In fact, everybody that worked there was, even the people who didn't speak standard English who were pushed in wheelchairs. They were all polite. They didn't seem to have any hatred for me because of my race, and it was a pretty nice experience overall.
Yeah. So like, it's not the end of the world. Like people live in Brazil, and a lot of them have decent lives.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. It's not the end of the world.
I think even like Nigeria, I'd get along with. Okay, Afghanistan for sure. I was there and I really liked the people. I wouldn't mind them there. So don't.
I mean, we wouldn't. A decline in the level of medicalization would not be a bad thing, honestly. People are suffering medicalized lives, and it's not necessarily a good way to go through life. So there's a time when people, if you got really sick, well, that was it. Say goodbye. And I don't know. I think probably wouldn't be so bad to return to that to some level, but it's not what people are used to.
I mean, look, fundamentally the reality is we all got to die someday, but and most hospital visits are life and death stuff. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to prescribe you antibiotics when you get bit by a dog or whatever.
Yeah, it's true.
And a lot of, listen, I don't know, man. I mean, the flip side is that, it's easy to be a glib asshole like I'm being right now when you're young and relatively good shape and everything else. When you're kind of looking down that barrel and you got some dude jabbering away, at his buddy in some language you don't understand. He's your primary healthcare provider.
Right. It's easy to say when you haven't had one, but it's just not nice to think about that something. I mean, and that's the story of a lot of things where the quality is just slowly going away. And you'll remember, hey, I remember when California had reliable electricity. I remember when rainstorms and wind didn't cripple millions of people's basic life support technologies. And is that going to come back in California? I don't see that coming back.
So what you're saying is that we might not need a character event. This thing's going to take care of itself.
It's just happens so slowly. It doesn't, but it's not going to, I don't think, it's just it's much slower than you think it's going to happen. Because you have, in California, you have this electrical grid that is just on its last legs. But it's not going to collapse. Okay, I'll tell you, my neighbor is a Pakistani lady. And we sit in the front yard while our kids play, and we talk about things. And so she goes, I don't know, my husband was so upset. Her husband is also Pakistani, but raised in America, and very Americanized in most ways. And she goes, I don't know, my husband's so mad. In Pakistan, they don't tell you when they're going to turn off the electricity. They just turn it off. And you don't know when it's going to come back. You just don't, it could be a day or it could be 4 days or whatever. So to me, it's very convenient that they tell you that you're ahead of time. So she, she didn't think it was a big deal.
Well, what ethnicity are they? Are they Punjabi or? Oh, they're Jews. You know about that? Pashtuns are a lost tribe Israel.
I've heard you say that. I mean, they wouldn't. They're definitely Sunni Muslims, but
that's all right.
Yeah,
they know it too. Ask her. What's their last name?
Well, they do like patronymic.
Ask them what his tribe is, because their tribes are named like Suleiman Khel. Suleiman is like Solomon. Khel is like the tribe of Solomon, and Livani like Levi, and Rabbani like I mean the Pashtuns give their kids names like the name Israel. They give their sons.
Do they?
And if you find me Arab that names their kid Israel, I will. I don't know what I'll do. I mean, I'll give you a free ride in my 1996. Okay, look, I know James, right? Like, am I right, James? You're kind of hoping that the collapse will happen fast enough that you will have the physical health to, finally.
No.
At least document it. Okay.
I know guys in your age bracket that will constantly tell me, it's 5 different guys and around 40 years old. They're like, I want this thing to happen now because I don't want to be your age or older when it happens. And I'd like a couple of my predictions to come true, before I croak, but if they don't, they don't, but I don't think that there's going to, unless something happens like a solar flare or something, I think this thing is going to limp along a lot longer than I'm going to be around.
All right.
Well, look, let's look at the cultural degradation that we see, especially because, and I know I bring this up a lot, but it's just so shocking to my conscience, the transgender thing, especially when it comes to children. We're in a situation where the mainstream thought on this is that giving a child drugs that will permanently cripple them, permanently remove their ability to have children, whether they're boys or girls, and do, at minimum, prevent them from having healthy bones for the rest of their lives, and do untold damage that we don't know because it's simply experimental, never known what will happen to these people who end up committing suicide at astronomical rates. And there's mainstream acceptance on the horizon. I don't think we're quite there yet, but there's already such a privilege of how you're supposed to accommodate these people in public that we're getting there. So what is that like? How much are people going to put up with? How much is God going to put up with? Because we've seen this before in history. This isn't really new.
Right. So I'm a Jew, right? Like we saw the Romans. The Romans had Heliogabalus, who was an emperor that, went through some kind of sex change. I don't know what that involved in 3rd century CE medical technology, but probably something gross. And there was the emperor's catamite that they made a god when he drowned in the Nile. I don't remember his name, and built temples to him all over the Roman Empire. So, and just as we had a pretty low opinion of the Romans and figured it would pass, I have a similar opinion of the current mainstream. Are people gonna rise up? No, of course not. They, you can tell them, you can hold up, whatever, a cat on TV and tell them it's an elephant, and they'll be like, that's an elephant. It doesn't matter. You can, they'll swallow anything because they want to. Cause they don't, like I said, man, these guys forget all that stuff. Look, you guys are having blackouts, right? In California. It's not news. The electrical grid is unreliable. I can buy a freaking generator. I was looking at this today from China for $1,000, a diesel generator, power my whole house, convert it for another $500 probably to run on used vegetable oil. I know you guys got enough fast food restaurants that you can get that stuff from and solve that problem. I can put a wind turbine on my house where I live because I live on top of a hill. We have electrical problems too, more in the nature of our 240 volts or actually like 180 volts. But hopefully solve it. And so can, don't tell me that most of the population in California doesn't have a spare $2,000 because, they all got cable and they all got TVs and big TVs too. So, I feel like pointing at the degeneracy being promoted by the center, by various foundations. Pritzker, I think, is one of the big, that billionaire in Chicago, and Pizzagate and all that other stuff. It's of course it's all true, but it's another form of escapism, because as long as escapism, because as long as I point my finger at the degeneracy and I'm outraged about it, instead of saying look, I'm a man. I take responsibility for my life in this, the degenerate soup, and the lives of those close to me. How can I fix problem X, Y, Z? James, you pointed out a lot in your writings, right? You did as best you could, and then you can't, when you're being swamped by feral hood rats and you got a wife and kids, then you got to go, move out to the county or whatever. Right. But most of the problems that most people are facing in America are not quite at that level, right? Most of the problems you could solve with some, just manual labor, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I homeschool my children.
There's a lot of complacence and people just being enamored of this idea that the system will just take care of all their needs if only they they vote for the right person and the system does the right thing. And, I just keep thinking of sheep. That's all I can think of. Ever since I spent time with Bob out west, he told me about sheep and what a low opinion he had of them. Yeah. So it's a domesticity.
It's not the wrong kind of sheep out there. See out here, we got a Wasi Bedouin sheep, and they're cut above the westernized sheep with the tails. These things are the Mike Tyson of the sheep world.
Well, yeah, and those the mountain sheep that they had out there were so impressive. Okay, few that are up in the mountains. That's really impressive. And you see what God does with this same frame. And this thing can hop around, on cliffs, and then a monkey would have a hard time getting up. And then you see what men do with the same frame, the same animal, and, one wolf could come by, and all these things will crowd together and suffocate each other in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we just have a lot of the same stuff going on with people, where people manage to domesticate themselves to such a degree.
When I came back from Afghanistan, I was the last thing I did before, and I was on my way to becoming religious, but the last thing I really wanted to do was learn how to. I had this several transformative experiences in the last couple of years before that. And one of them was that I realized I was a barbarian, and that, I was surrounded by objects that I had no idea how they were made, and I wanted to learn how to do that. And there was this course called the Fab Academy where you learn everything from like 3D printing, making like basic circuits and programming them, and everything else from scratch. And so I did that. But for the first month, I showed up to Rhode Island where this thing was being held and lived with these two guys, and they were my roommates. And these two dudes were about my age, and they were so alien they might have been a different species. Like they didn't like what I said earlier. Like dying is scary, but I don't really want to live either. All that, and I was creeped out, man. It was like a zombie movie, really. And I kept trying to talk to these guys, and they just hated it. Like when you try to like you can, there's like a different. It's not even a different world. It's the same world, but just a different way of approaching it. They didn't want it. It's not like they're sheep. It's not in them genetically. It's not. I don't believe. I don't like. I mean, of course they talk about hominids and so on and so forth, but I don't think. I'm not like the alt-right. Dudes that well, you got an average IQ of 75, therefore you're subhuman. That's horseshit. Because, I'm probably smarter than most of them. That doesn't mean that they're subhumans, It's a mindset. I don't know how to explain it. James, you know what I'm trying to say here?
Well, supposedly the average IQ in medieval Europe was a lot lower than it is now. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it was true, that those people actually accomplished a lot of the foundation of our different sciences and literary traditions, and they built cathedrals, and they managed to actually somehow hold off against a religion that wanted to wipe them out, or at least wipe the religion out. So there's just something about, I think, having it tough, that makes people more adaptable, despite their intelligence. I know people that are a lot smarter than me that I don't think they'd be able to survive very long in places where people a lot less intelligent than they survive, just because I think that having a soft, easy life, I think is just really one of our biggest pitfalls.
I think it exposed something, but that something doesn't. You know about the Cathars, right? The 12th century Genzian heresy.
Yes. Yeah, the Albigensian. I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation, but in the south of France, near the Pyrenees.
Yeah. Their whole operating philosophy, right? Like this world is fundamentally evil, and this life is suffering, and like the highest good is to just die, not leaving any children. And when I read about that, and I read about Gnosticism, that was just one Manichaean religion. And I thought, like, we had that without all the theological stuff,
Oh, that is becoming a religion. I know a number of people who think it would be a sin against whatever, the world, to have children, and it would be a sin against the child to bring the child into the world. I know a lot of people that feel that way.
But those guys didn't feel that way because, I mean, that was basically the Mouse Heaven experiment philosophy of life. I think they were also into various homosexual stuff, if I recall correctly. But it's not because they had, like too much Domino's pizza or whatever, right? In the 12th century.
Right.
So,
Yes, I don't know. I don't know enough about the Catholic heresy, but they were definitely anti-natalist, and they were also abortionists to what extent I don't know. So, but that came about in a period when Christendom had lasted longer than anybody thought it would. At the end of the 900s, people thought that the world was going to end. So it'll be interesting to see when the Catholic heresy came about, when it actually started. It cropped up again in the reign of Louis XIV, briefly, in the same area, in the south of France. You know, so it's not just. And there was in Sicily, there was a school of atheism around 240 BC.
You're talking about Pythagoras? No, not Pythagoras.
This was Theophrastus, who was the guy that curated Aristotle's writing and might have actually written a lot of it himself. His daughter was supposed to be the head of a school of philosophy in Sicily, and she was an atheist. And that was, there was a huge population crash during this period. A lot of wealthy people weren't having children. They didn't have citizen armies anymore. They had to go just to mercenary armies, and the Romans just rolled in and rolled them all up. And it didn't take that much effort. You know, so that was the end of another version of Western civilization where people weren't even trying to have children or defend their own civilization or hiring people to do it for them.
And the Roman Empire had the same thing, right? Like right around Marcus Aurelius' time.
Yeah. So it starts around then, and Gabbalus, the guy that you mentioned, in the 2020s, I think it's 2027 AD, where you have this extreme degeneracy. 217 AD is one where is a date that sticks out in my mind really clearly, where you have a really degenerate emperor that was jealous of a gladiator. So it was you had the same type of cycle that went in, and then there was an attempt to bring it back, and then you ended up with another degenerate cycle right before the Germans just rolled it all up a couple hundred years later.
Trump is not going to save America, is what you're saying?
He might be like a Diocletian type figure, right?
I was in Diocletian's palace in Split, in Croatia, right across the water from, where he retired. It's still standing. The Croatians got a mini city with shops and everything else built in there, and they're living in there.
Oh, cool. Well, maybe Trump Towers will still be up way down the line.
God, I hope not.
No, those
I'm going to concentrate on the magna chamber. Thanks for hard tonight.
Towers are not going to survive the passage of cheap electricity and reliable energy. You can't climb up and down. Imagine the power goes out.
That's an advantage.
Yeah, well, all those diabetic zombies aren't going to be able to climb the stairs once the elevators go down.
Yeah, that's true. There's even big He-Man like you can only climb so many steps each day to get
especially with the guy poking you in the ear from the next landing up. Exactly. Yeah, that's defensiveness.
You know what?
On the roof.
I'm using this for inspiration for a post-apocalyptic novelette. I'll have you know, I just decided it. I've never really seriously wondered what you do with these tall buildings once you can't pump water up to the top and the elevators don't work anymore. So you just gave me an idea, Baruch. I'm going to run with it.
Well, look at if you cache rainwater from right, then you can. I mean, you're not going to have like the same kind of occupancy that you have today. I don't know, man.
Build a cistern inside the tower. Yeah. Okay.
The first floor. Yeah, I mean the top floor. No, because I don't know the load.
How heavy it is, but if there's gonna be fewer people, I mean water is heavy. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
They've
there's
already got a water tank on top of every one of these buildings in New
yeah,
York.
but
You
how
can
many
see
days worth
yeah.
of water is there? And I mean, New York
How many
gets
people?
year round, water year round. But like here, we only get water half the year. Same for you,
Oh,
right?
you guys, California's done. We only for like that's not even on the table. California's out. We get water half the year, but everywhere in Israel that you go, there's cisterns that catch rainfall.
That's what I want to ask
Uh,
you because you have your hillside, orchard, your guerrilla orchard that you have there, and I wanted to ask you, can you guys do some like rainwater caching or something?
Yeah, but that takes
It's big
serious
labor.
earth
Yeah, a lot of
equipment.
digging.
It's earth moving equipment.
Yeah.
No, it's not that hard. It's earth moving equipment, and maybe in a few years, maybe in a few years I'll be able to just pay for some big earth mover to go in there and excavate and then plaster it with ferro cement, put a roof over it, and you're good. You got to remember that the weight of the water goes up like proportional to the cube of the radius, I think. And so, probably we'd build a bunch of smaller tanks rather than one honking big one. But yeah,
water,
maybe
the depth is super important because it gets heavier. Like if you get a deeper, even a narrow cistern that's very deep will require great strength at the bottom. So you need to like balance. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's in the long-term plans.
Yeah. Because we're getting rain like crazy right now, in California. It's going to be 2 good rain years in a row, which had gotten to be unusual. Don't know what global warming will bring us. It's already snowed here.
It's been unseasonably cold over here on the East Coast, so I'm looking forward to some nightly strolls without a high hood rat density.
Nice. Yeah, they're not going to do well with it if the climate cools down. It's gonna, I'm gonna invest in shale oil stocks. I remember in the military that was like a big revelation to me that my fellow soldiers who happened to be black needed to rub various lotions on themselves, otherwise they'd start turning gray and ashy and so on. So
our running back on the Trinity High School football team was he was the only black dude on the team. His name was Timmy Lipscomb. He was a super nice guy. He's very athletic, and he would turn this ghostly gray when it got really cold out. And once we tackle him, we'd have to pick him up, and he would be stiff as a board.
really,
We used to feel we didn't even want to hit him hard. His body would start to shut down because he's one of those guys with very little body fat. He was super muscular.
right.
But yeah, I know. In fact, I had to. My fighter was going out last week to fight, and he was going to be on film, and his knees were. He said, "My knees are ashy. Can you put some Vaseline on my knees?" And I'm like, "If the athletic commissioner sees me doing it, he might get disqualified." And he's like, "I don't want to go out there with ashy knees. Please do it." And then I did it, and then I like wiped them off with my pants and everything like that, so it wouldn't be obvious to the referee. But yeah, it's.
Is that just for cosmetic reasons, or is there some reason?
Yeah. Well, if you're not allowed to put Vaseline on unless it's done in front of the referee. And he would normally do it before grappling to keep his skin from getting tore up, especially scrambling on the mat. But he was just being vain about having ashy knees. I guess he was afraid that his mother would see him with ashy knees on the video. So that was it. So yeah, it's a real concern.
Strange.
Is that Oliver you're talking about?
Yes.
Pass my regards to Oliver.
Well, thank you. Thanks, sir.
Wish him luck in all his fighting endeavors.
Right, well, he broke one finger on the guy's face, and fight went 3 rounds, so it wasn't a disaster considering he had such a hard time making weight. But he managed to lose almost 60 pounds total before, in the time period that he decided to take the fight, and when the fight actually came off. So
down to what?
Oh, he ended up weighing 175.2 the night before the fight. He was coming down from 230.
Wow.
So So he did that in like 5 months, I guess.
Wow.
So that was pretty good. So I want to know you said hi. He passed out while he was trying to make weight, and I was worried about him. And then he snaps out of it on the way to the weigh-in, and he asked me what I thought about the impeachment hearings. I was like, oh, okay, he's back. He's okay.
Going back to Trump, I just wanted to say this. I don't think I said it. Is that people who are extremely disappointed in Trump are just so strange and dumb to me because, Baruch, you said, Trump's not going to actually be able to save America. And that's what I realized. Honestly, I realized it, started to grapple with it back when I read Moldbug, which was in 2012. And it's like all this stuff is already baked into the cake, And so Trump got elected, and that was really unexpected and exciting and fun and stuff. But everything that's happened since then was already baked into the cake to me. That the fact that he has been unable to close the border and unable to do this and that, whatever we wanted him to do, just wasn't surprising to me. So I always, I'm amazed by the guys on the right who take it really personal that he couldn't get this stuff done. And it's like, and it fits into the IQ thing too, because it's a lot of people who are obsessed with IQ, and there is more to life than that. And I think that what we have is a system which brings out the worst in everybody. I like smart people. I like hanging out with people who are smarter than me, and I think life is generally better for smart people. But we have a system but it's possible for less smart people to have worthy and satisfying lives. But we have a system that is like the worst for everybody, it makes less smart people into barely functioning hominids, and it makes smart people into nihilistic, suicidal, miserable,
Mouse heaven.
Mouse heaven. Yeah.
But, smart people, there's certain kinds of stupidity that you got to be really smart to be able to convince yourself into believing. Like, I don't think that any 70 IQ hood rat out there, like, trying to skulk up on James in a painfully obvious fashion, if you showed him some dude in a dress, on hormones, that dude would look at it and go, oh, that's a woman. That's a lady.
No,
how dare you?
That's a bitch. Yeah, you're right. You gotta have a certain level of intelligence to engage in certain levels of stupidity.
Right? They're not smart enough to be that dumb. None of them would look at a pack of their fellow hood rats skulking up on them and go, "Oh, those are disadvantaged young men, fundamentally good at heart. Maybe they got lost and want to ask for directions." You got to be.
You're absolutely right. Right? Yeah, they wouldn't look at somebody hunting them and say, "Oh, he had it really rough coming up. I feel bad for him."
God Emperor Trump, in my mind, is like an example of that same level of stupidity. If you look at Trump, who's basically like, Trump's a bozo. People like Clinton was the first black president. Well, I don't buy it. Trump is the first black president. Okay? Fundamentally, okay? Trump is like what every rapper aspires to be. Okay?
No, that's literally true. He was like a cultural icon for the hip-hop world. But I don't think it's right to say that he is a bozo. I think that he, in a lot of ways, he's just giving voice to really average American, and you can say the average American's a bozo, but something like, hey, maybe we should have some factories in the United States. Maybe we should, really basic.
I'm not saying the guy's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not right. I'm saying he's a bozo. That's two things. A bozo right all day long. Trump's a bozo all day long. But at the same time, he's a dude that wears, yes, he wears an orange toupee. Yes, he cheated on his wives, blah, 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 blah. He's a freaking bozo. I didn't say I don't like the guy. I like the guy. He's a bozo.
He's funny.
He's hilarious. He's the funniest person. Yeah, for sure.
He's hilarious. That poem with the snake, That was great. That is exactly what the first black president would do. He would rap, humiliating his opponent in public with the cleverness of his rap. And look, where was I going with this?
I don't know. The stupidity of. Right.
Exactly.
The
So
stupidity of the God Emperor.
you gotta be like that level of intellectual dumbass to convince yourself that this bozo is gonna make your junky neighbors stop shooting up and stealing your hubcaps. He's gonna do it, man. He's God Emperor. He's gonna do it. Like, you're out of your mind. You know, that's the same kind of, that's like the stupidity of a white guy who listens to some hip hop album where some dude that, you know, I don't know, maybe sold like $5,000 worth of dope in his life and went to jail for 5 years for it. He's rapping about driving Bentleys, and that dude's an idiot. But the white guy that's listening to that, making here, and going, man, I can do that, dude. No, that. So you understand what I'm saying here? Like, there's a level of stupidity that you got to be intelligent to achieve.
Oh, absolutely,
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a drawing, like the IQ sweet spot where, like,
the uncanny valley.
Yeah, the IQ uncanny valley where, like, you think you're just a galaxy brain, but actually you have the dumbest opinion. You know, the actual, like, toothless redneck next door is smarter than you because he knows that a man is a man, is a woman is a woman, and, you know, all this stuff. Yeah.
Right. I was in Iraq and we were talking about this stuff, and I said, look, you know, what we're actually having here with the insurgents is not really a war. It's kind of a stupidity competition. And it's really a close call because they're naturally more talented at it, but we got organization on our side.
You make it up in your
Whoever loses the competition wins the war.
You know, I got partway through that thing that you sent about this, like, you know, spying factory that they set up in Afghanistan to analyze cell phones and whatever. And it's like, what? Wow. I try and comprehend that all the most powerful militaries in the world have created a huge data center with all these, like, thousands of employees that, you know, will never set foot in a war zone, but they're there in a war zone analyzing data so that we can drop a drone strike on the wrong target because they swap SIM cards anyway. And I just think these people, it's the perfect example of, like, a bureaucracy just out of control. Like, hey, we can do this, so let's do it. There's no point in blowing anything up in Afghanistan. There's just simply something, a hobby for our bureaucratic military. That's all I can get from that.
There's no point it doesn't improve your life or your ability to get electricity, but I guarantee you, if you go in the NSA parking lot, you know, you're going to see a lot of nice vehicles there.
Sure.
You know, those dudes are not living in cardboard boxes by any means. And, you know, and every military base, you know, I was hanging out in southwestern Afghanistan. I was co-located with a platoon of Marines. I was a civilian. The Afghans who I spent all my time with asked me to sleep on the Marine side because they were afraid that the Afghan police would come and kill me as I slept. So I spent my daytime hanging out with the Afghan district governor, sitting in the corner, and I was wearing local clothes and just sitting there being quiet, drinking tea and watching him hold court. And I ate by him too. But at night I was over there. And every time I went to the Marines Ops Center, which was the only place you could get internet, these kids were on there either looking at the truck they were going to buy with their reenlistment bonus or checking out how much money they were going to get every month from the GI Bill. So Afghanistan, in one way, like, organically, it wouldn't even be a contest because the U.S. could just level every village and, you know, like, kill everything down to the chickens and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what it's there for. You know, it set itself rules where, you know, like, if you accidentally kill somebody that's not a bad guy, that's a screw up. That's a failure. You need to investigate why you did that. And if you're going to get that level of precision and mostly hit the right people, and they mostly do hit the right people, you know, you need that kind of overmatch. You need the smartest people in the NSA.
sitting there on the end of a massive data gathering pipeline and in real time telling the guys that are going out there hitting people, like, listen, this is what a dude is. And yeah, man, sometimes you make mistakes, and, I can tell you that from personal experience, because this stuff is hard. It's not a video game, like there's a lot of bad stuff that happens. The SIM card thing is just one example. God, man, I could tell you guys so many funny stories. I almost died on one mission because I was running down an alley in night vision goggles, and I stepped on something that I thought was solid ground, and it was sewage that went up almost to my waist. And, and I mean, and it could have, it could have been 6 feet tall, and I don't know. I know a team in 2007, these guys drove a Humvee. It snowed in Baghdad for the first time in however long. And these guys were driving, and they drove down a patch road and drove their Humvee into a hole which was 6 or 7 feet deep and was entirely filled with liquid sewage. And I think they all got out. Nobody died, but they very easily could have, and a bunch of really interesting equipment was filled with sewage and destroyed. And like, that's stuff, that's just like basic, even if the guys you're fighting, they're, like they're way overmatched and everything else. And like every once in a while they get a lucky shot in and they kill a few people. But still just that, the chaos of war, even on that level, just makes that happen. It's hard, fundamentally. It will be harder in the States, I think.
Of course.
In England.
Yeah, but when you stop and say, Trump wants to withdraw troops from Syria or draw down Afghanistan or whatever, and you have like absolute apoplectic meltdowns coming out of, Jim. I mean, I will never forget that Jim Mattis resigned over the simple idea of withdrawing troops from Syria. So you have this situation where it's like the bureaucracy that wants to be there. Nobody can tell you what we're doing there, what's the end game, what is the point, what was the point 20 years ago? Nobody knows. There is no point. It's been erased. It's gone. And now we want to stop doing this. And you have, I mean, Jim Mattis, who when he was given that job, everybody acted like it was, now we're going to really show those guys what's up. And then something simple like, hey, Syria, which is one of the more recent entanglements, we're going to stop doing that. And that guy had to jump up and down and take his ball and go home publicly.
Yeah, because General Mattis, spent his, the previous, 18 years of his career, most of his career, in those wars, and sending guys into harm's way and telling them that what they were doing was valuable and honorable and important, and believing in himself, making himself believe on some level. And so when you tell a guy like that, oh, by the way, everything that you've been doing is bullshit. All those guys that died that you were in charge of, the mission that they died doing was bullshit. And we'd like you to start shutting that down. That's serious cognitive dissonance. I mean, if James was having PTSD nightmares from his supermarket, management experience, project that onto Mattis, project it on his whole identity since he was 22 years old has been that he was a Marine, and, everything else, and fighting the good and honorable fight.
Yeah. I mean, a supermarket is actually necessary to life, feeds people. And
so is in the military.
Well, yeah, but I didn't get anybody killed. So some of my guys got beat up by Negroes on the way back and forth to work, but I hired somebody to work them over. So, it's like I don't have that on my conscience. So yeah, I could imagine something like that. You led a war effort for years, and so sure, that makes sense.
Especially the guy telling you that is a bozo. his military experience is like, so he went to some military academy, and then, et cetera, so forth. You guys, you know where I'm going with this. And fundamentally, like on the military side, like Trump definitely overcompensates. Pardoning those dudes whom he pardoned was, I mean, it was kind of ridiculous, at least in one, probably in two of those cases, where those guys got, that was one case where the country made the right call, and
he's done some questionable pardons, no doubt about that, or commutations or whatever. We could definitely look at those. I don't really want to.
I'm not. No. I'm saying from the perspective of Mattis, like who's a guy that's like played that game and everything else, and then this dude, like this is the pinnacle of your career.
Yeah.
But you're working for Donald Trump, and you're shutting down Syria.
Yeah, Secretary of Defense, and he goes around and he talks about all the men who have died because of the orders he's given.
Right.
And here is your chance to put a stop to that, and he declined. I mean, it's just the petulance of it. It struck me. He wrote this public letter. We can't, and he didn't even talk about American soldiers. He talked about how we don't leave our allies in the lurch. What allies in Syria?
The Kurds.
Yeah, the Kurds.
Which, whatever, I went to northwestern Iraq in 2007, and the guys I was replacing told me that the Kurds, one of the first things they did when they got liberated was go burn out their Yazidi neighbors. So, everybody's Borat is a best case scenario over there.
Everybody became an expert on the Kurds, a month ago or 2 months ago. All of a sudden, everybody knows the long, tremendous history of alliance with Americans and Kurds. Like, give me a break. They're just, I don't know who they are, and I don't care. It's ridiculous to think that the average American citizen who is busy, slurping down Coca-Cola and eating Pizza Hut or whatever to keep the insulin requirements up should have any business carrying. I mean, the whole thing is so absurd. I don't even know where I'm going with it. It's absurd.
Oh, it's the business of empire. And
right.
There's, for instance, just the number of people who have good jobs with the best health benefits and the best pension programs in the Maryland and Northern Virginia area around D.C., all those jobs depend on stuff that might not seem like it makes sense in terms of national security, and unless you're some kind of neocon nerd. But it's like the drug war. I mean, how big is the DEA? I don't know. There's got to be thousands of people in it, and I bet all of them are making a decent salary, have the best health benefits, and have the best retirement plan you can have.
And a fun, exciting job.
Yeah, and you get to kick in doors and shoot people.
I know a lady who worked for the DEA, and it was like her job was to make PowerPoint presentations about, the dangers of CBD industry or something. It's just
okay, but compare that to making PowerPoints working for Kaiser Permanente.
It's about the same. I don't know.
Not as much fun. And plus, if you're in all these endeavors, you're sold on a crusade. You're a crusader on a crusade. Whether it's the drug war or the war on terrorism, whatever it is, these things are actually labeled as crusades. And all you have to do is believe it, believe what you're told, feel good about the fact that you're basically a member of the knightly class and in the American Imperial Knight.
Well, beats digging for potatoes with the serfs, right?
Right, right. Now, one thing I am wondering about I have been in and out of Baltimore City and Baltimore County now for 2 months. I have not seen a single police officer on patrol, not one. When I see it, now I used to see like 2 or 3 a night at one point in the area that I've been in for the past couple of weeks. I know the area I used to work in, that went down to I was seeing 1 a month or maybe 1 a week when it used to be 3 a night. Well, the area that I'm in right now is really close to the county seat. And what they're doing is they're just going on calls. They go 5 or 10 deep on every call because everything is a disaster, potential disaster on multiple levels. And it's made things more comfortable with me. I can actually carry something with me to protect myself when I'm walking the streets at night. So I'm wondering, there's obviously the new aristocracy, the new people that are allowed to commit violence and not do violence. It's been expanded from cops to African Americans. African Americans are basically now in this area. They're just allowed to attack anybody with impunity and pretty much get away with it, even if it's the police. I'm wondering if we're going to get to the point where if you do not nod your head with respect or bow or say an honorific to an African American, if that will be a crime. And I wonder how much farther we got to go down this rabbit hole. Where I am now in this area.
Well, I got a question. If you don't see any cops, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound. Like what's a crime mean except for something you can't get away with?
Oh, so it would have to be on customer service situation, probably people that are in these captive workplace situations is where I envision it happening. And I envision it being tendered as a reason for an attack by one of these people that, they were disrespected. Because you're already seeing almost every, you're getting situations where guys kill people of the guilt race. And they're getting off on it because they're just saying to the jury that they used the N-word. So I'm wondering if that will get to the point where they'll say, well, they just disrespected me generally, and that's as if they used the N-word. In other words, they didn't treat me like an old Southern aristocrat. I'm envisioning this type of stuff happening, like mostly in a situation where an employee gets beat up because of some perceived slight, and then the person that beats them up uses this as their legal defense. So, but as far as my situation with no police on patrol, I'm running into more courtesy. I mean, I had two very courteous situations in the past 3 days with younger, larger, darker men, and they were very polite. Yeah. And they walked to the other side of the street, and they just looked at me, and there was like no wolfing or anything. I had my pimp cane and my trench coat, and they were very copacetic.
They saw Friday the 13th or the Freddy Krueger movie, The Nightmare on Elm Street, when they were kids. You brought people memories back.
So it's going multiple ways at the same time, but I'm thinking like in terms of like the media end of it. Is it going to get that way, or is this basically the high water mark where
let me give you the future, because the future is already here. It's just not here everywhere. In France, there was a dude who was of African descent who just recently the judge found him not guilty of murder because he had smoked some weed before doing what he did. And what he did was he took a Jewish lady called Sarah Halimi, and I don't remember how he got into her apartment. She was a teacher. She was like a grade school teacher. She was like about 50. And when he realized she was Jewish, because he saw Jewish books there, he, I think, tortured her for an hour and then threw her out the window, murdered her like that. And he said, in the trial, when I saw the Torah, I felt that, or whatever he saw there, I felt that, she had offended me personally. He was a Muslim too, and so on and so forth. And the judge found him not guilty because he said, listen, this poor, oppressed young man obviously had a psychotic episode from the marijuana he'd smoked. And so therefore, how can you expect him to be accountable for his actions? So, I mean, it's not even that she didn't tip her hat. She had.
So look, there's something very, suicidal on a, and I appreciate this lady was Jewish, but this happens to non-Jews in all these countries, where large influx of Muslims, Africans, Arabs, whatever they are, have come. But just a day or two ago, a guy went on a stabbing spree on the bridge in London, and
they fought him off with a narwhal tusk.
Yeah, they fought him off, and the cops actually just shot him. Pretty dirty shoot. But
they didn't have a narwhal tusk on hand.
Yeah, go ahead and straighten it. So, but my point is that the same day, the guy managed to kill at least 2 people. One guy that he killed was out there. His career was rehabilitating criminals, and which in England, which in England is minority people, okay, and recent immigrants and so on. And his dad comes out and says, now don't want the right wing to turn my son's death into a talking point or whatever. You know, he gave the speech, like, which is now the standard speech when your child is killed by these people. You know, Molly Tibbetts.
That is standard speech.
It's a standard speech.
It's like that one girl in South Africa that was,
yeah,
I think like 20 years ago, right? She was like dragged out of her car and like raped and beaten to death, something like that. And her parents went over there and like gave the dude that did it a hug and blah blah blah, moo moo moo, and so on and so forth.
So there's some kind of suicidal malaise in our people.
They want to live.
The West German or the German politician's daughter who was murdered by one of the immigrant guys. He said something positive on behalf of the murderer of his daughter, to the effect that she wouldn't want, this fellow, persecuted or whatever. So, there's definitely that sickness, and I see it. There was a local lady that didn't call the police when this guy was trying to kick in her front door because he was an African American, and she was afraid that the racist police were going to beat this poor guy up.
Ruin his chance of getting into med school.
Right. Yeah. He probably had a student loan application in his hand while he was trying to kick in his front door. So I in my life, I've seen plenty of that. And, it exists in the hearts and minds of people that are relatively close to me. So, that's what I'm wondering about. Is this the high water mark for this plague, or does it get worse from here?
It gets worse. Look, I remember in 2010, was it? What's his name? Nidal, that Arab doctor in the U.S. military went and shot up that waiting room.
In Texas.
Hassan Nidal.
Yeah. Workplace violence.
It was because of the occupation of the West Bank. You don't understand, man. He was a good boy. He didn't do nothing. But General George Casey, who was the Army Chief of Staff, said that the biggest tragedy would be if this affected diversity.
Yeah, that's always. And Steve Saylor calls it the front lash, where whenever one of these special people does something wrong, the first thing you do is worry about the innocent members, of that guy's group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
you think it'll get worse?
Well, I don't know, man. It'll get worse in the areas they have control over, but you've just given me new hope, because you've said that these guys are hiding out their police stations and then moving out, 5 to 10 strong, whenever like something. And so I think the areas over which they have control, where they'll impose this degeneracy, will get stronger. For instance, probably you don't see a lot of like drag queen story hour in those areas of Baltimore.
This is true. And I think it's part of the solution is kind of it's embedded in the problem, because since every one of these people in Baltimore, for instance, are now de facto martyrs, that you've got to have 5 cops to make sure that you don't have to hurt the guy. And then you got to have 5 more cops to make sure that none of his friends effectively fight the cops, because it's now okay to fight the cops and they'll be excused. So it keeps all the cops off of my ass, so I could actually now have a decent chance of defending myself, because my big enemy has been the police for most of my stay in Baltimore. I've always got to worry that I'm actually carrying something I could use to defend myself with. Is it going to be the cops, or is it going to be a hood rat?
Oh, it's the same thing here.
You know, so
Here.
So right now it's actually, I feel much better. I'm actually going to go to my old job at night during the hours I used to travel to work, just to do it, because the last time I did it, it kind of like broke me psychologically, because I knew that the last two guys I couldn't have effectively defended myself against in my current condition, and they just let me off the hook for some reason. So I stopped working because of that. So just to kind of improve my own perspective of self, I'm just going to go take that journey, because I feel like I'll actually be able to defend myself if I get attacked. And and I'm going to visit Steve-O, and I've got to take him back. He gave me these terrible horror movie DVDs made by some film company in the 80s from New Jersey, Trauma Entertainment, and I've had them for 2 years.
Dude, I've seen those.
Right.
I'm going to take. Yeah, we watched those. Yeah, it was a horrible Toxic Avenger, I believe was.
Right. It's a Toxic Avenger series. So I'm going to take those back to him, one night before I head back out of town again. And I actually feel like I'm not going to have any problem doing it, because I really don't think that the kind of guys that were hunting me then, I don't think they're going to come after me now, because I'm more fit. I'm actually going to be carrying something better than umbrella. And I'm pretty confident I'm not going to run into any cops. So
wonderful. See, when we think, people make the mistake of thinking linearly, but life isn't linear. Life is dialectical, right? Yeah. So things bring about their opposites, and then they have a synthesis. And you see, Lynn, there's hope.
Yes.
I have to have hope. I have hope by definition, because, and I don't know if you can see it on my face, but this podcast has been pretty black-pilling for me. Just difficult topics, but I have little kids like you. I can't see much. He's trying to show you. It's like a baseball bat.
Yeah, it's the cold steel walkabout. This stuff's indestructible. It's flexible. It weighs like 3 pounds. It's a yard long, and it's a yard long polypropylene pimp cane. Okay, and for the type of stick fighting I do, I feel confident that I could dispatch bump and grind if it comes to that. So.
Be careful, because they need, don't do anything that will preclude them from getting into that grad school,
I won't. No, they're right hand. I'll actually ask them if they're left-handed or right-handed first. Okay, I'll probably just going to whack knees. And I did promise Oliver that if I do get attacked by a pack of hood rats and I have a stick or stick-like object on me, that I point to the one with a smartphone and say, "World Star this," and give him a pass. And then after I'm done, before I get arrested, call Oliver up and say, "Some hood rats posted on World Star. Go clip it." So he did make me promise. Go, World Star it is.
I can't wait to go back to Utah.
That is true. Me too. Listen, I do want to say one last hopeful thing before we cut this thing short, because I don't remember what I'm doing tomorrow. Probably involves breaking rocks or something. Before my workday starts, I want to say this. I've read a lot of your concerns about going to jail, and I understand. But a lot of people have told me that jail was the most civilized, mannered, calm place that they've been to in the States. And I mean, everybody, I'm the first one in I think 3 generations in my family not to go to jail. But
congratulations.
my oh, well, I mean, the night is young.
Yeah.
The night is young, right?
I've had some jailbirds tell me the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about it.
I'll tell you what it is with me. I'm not that worried about the experience, because the first thing I do is probably murder some accountant that got busted for having some weed on him, just so I get put into solitary. But the guys that have been making sure that I'm unarmed so that all my enemies can attack me for the past 38 years, I'm just not going to let them put the cuffs on me. I just can't tolerate that. I've been running and hiding from cops for 38 years in this area. So that's why it's a good reason for me to get the hell out of this area in a couple of weeks.
That is a pronto. Yeah, I completely agree.
But I would probably do quite well in a prison situation. Because I've talked to guys that have been in there, and I got along with them.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to go to solitary, man. Imagine how much writing you could do. If you could get this much mileage out of your hominids in your supermarket, people in jail are an order of magnitude more interesting, at the very least, because they were capable of committing some sort of action with the capital A to get in there.
Yeah, if I stayed in the general population, I would just be Homer showing up, with the Achaeans, and they'd probably all like me and want me to be their biographer because that's what happened with those guys when they got out. But I would selfishly want to finish my novels in solitaire.
No, man, you would be the Dostoevsky of Baltimore.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate this. Probably the other person that has pretty much said the same thing to me is, I think you're metaphysical opposite the guy I lived with out in Portland.
I got truck drivers in my family too, so
right.
Not a foreign cast to me.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, look on the brighter side, man. Don't go making any rash decisions, involving cops. God is good and wise, and everything is for the best.
I really appreciate those sentiments, and
nice.
I appreciate that. Right.
And I look forward to reading your dispatches from Utah and so on and so forth. And I think it will be a positive thing, to be out of that environment.
Yes. It's actually it's actually been wearing on me since I've been back. I did just email 15 posts to my niece for the crypto site, which you read on, and about half of them were written out in Utah or on the train, so there's more of that coming.
Yeah, that's good stuff. When you first sort of made a break with Harm City, I think there was a question mark about what is it like if James LaFond writes about nice things, and it worked out. You can write about nice things.
Yeah, so one of my favorite interviews, she didn't know it was an interview, was this. I think she's 85 years old. I mean, I hang out with her son, and he's 60. And she was complimenting me on the work I was doing on the side of the road, telling me I should be a Mormon. And she turned out to be a professional softball player way back, before I was even a kid. So I ended up talking to her about her experience playing softball on a traveling team of softball players. So, so I got a bunch of experiences like that. So,
there you go. So
we get more of them.
I think it adds a new layer of depth to your writing.
But I have to take one more trip across Harm City at night on the bus to go see Steve-O and take the Toxic Avenger DVDs back to him.
Shit, if you'd asked me if I'd ever hear that phrase again, I wouldn't.
These are the sort of cosmic threads, you never expect.
And he's my inheritor. He took over the dairy case at Gershbeck Supermarket. He's, the only guy on the crew that could be trusted to rotate the cultured milk products after I left.
I'm sure the management's appreciative of that and pays a hefty premium,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll find out. Maybe I'll interview him about it and find out how big his raise was. Hoping he at least got $1 an hour.
Well, I think that we'll call it a night, and it's really super late for you, Baruch, so we'll let you go. Thank you
Thanks
very
so much
much
for staying up all night to hang out with us. Baruch.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It was a good change of pace. It was what I call a break, you know.
Getting late and we've got shit to do in outer space. Mothers can wait. We will take the ones worth saving. Pack your bags, we are vacating now. Forever, forever. There's a cosmic radio in my head, and it's reading news articles, and the correspondent sadly said the universe is flat. He also mentioned that gravity is caused by our cavities and our reflection of time's not a receding headline, it's all mass produced in the back of our mind. There's things, there's some things that we will never know, and I don't ever want to know. And so it goes. Let's buck it up, let us run amok, let's do the things that we want to do. We're animals after all. Out yonder through the traffic and the people too. Boy, it really makes me wonder how we enjoy fucking people over. You used to be happy once. We go monkey to an animal. We don't really like ourselves that much. We got the pills, we got the alcohol.